Cocoon by Jason Halstead, published by Novel Concept Publishing LLC. This is the third part in the Chipped saga. Like and subscribe to help make this channel a success, and find out when the next part in the story is released.
Carmella, need your help.
Carmine was already standing up from where her messy couch covered in tablets and printed off sheets detailing spell formulae, diagrams, and lists of arcane ingredients. By the time she was upright and balanced, the call was over. She'd barely had time to say hello before he spoke and hung up.
Rude.
She looked at the phone. The number, as expected, was blocked. It didn't matter. The voice was familiar. Not many people sounded like that, and of the few that did, only one had her number.
Hills, you poor loco bastard. What have you gotten into?
She looked down at herself and sighed. The long tank top and underwear weren't going to cut it. He hadn't given her anything to go by, so that meant he knew she could figure out where he was. She sighed again and flipped through her phone to find the encryption program and activate it. Only then did she open the next app that reached out to find the latest contact for Flux and initiate a call.
Hey, sweetie. How are you? Find yourself a nice, sexy man or woman yet?
Dios mío. I regret to inform you that I'm still attracted to men.
That's okay. As long as they can make you see stars while your knees won't hold you up, it doesn't matter, right?
Carmine ignored the question.
Look, I'm sorry, but I just got a call and I need to find out where someone is.
Flux's teasing tone was gone in an instant.
What happened? Is everyone okay? Amy, Jane, Razi, no, of course he's okay. I didn't get any alerts. No alerts for anyone, actually. Okay, what's the deal?
Chill, chica. The family's good.
Carmine heard the sigh of relief over the phone.
I just heard you sigh.
Well, I'm glad everyone's okay.
No, your phone is inside your brain. Your brain doesn't sigh. How could he hear it?
It's good, right? I've got programs that take my emotions and translate them for this sort of thing.
It's creepy.
Don't be a hater. Creating things out of nothing by waving your hands and speaking nonsense, now that's creepy. Oh, did I tell you? I met somebody.
Yeah, you're married.
Not like that. Cass actually met her, then introduced me when I had to go and save her. Except it turns out she didn't need saving.
Carmine tried and failed to follow the younger woman's conversation.
What?
The new girl, her name's Stormy. Well, it's Amber really, but don't tell her I told you. Anyhow, she's a witch, like you.
Oh, great.
Carmine tried to think how she could turn the conversation back to what she needed.
Is everyone okay?
Great. They're great. Cass has a friend she can scare the shit out of in her car now while I work. Stormy's about to get her GAD, and we're trying to figure out what's next.
GED? Carmine smiled. She had her diploma, and so did her sisters, but it had been a tough call for her. Then there was Amy, her best friend. For being the realest person, Carmine knew everything about Amy was fake, at least from an official government documentation point of view.
I'm totally burning cycles here. I'm sorry. I just miss you so much. But stop me before I go parallel again. What did you need, babe?
Not sure what going parallel means unless it's you spreading your legs. But that wouldn't be parallel, would it? Anyhow, I need to know who just called me. Wait, not who, where's you at? I'm, 99% sure it's Hills.
Dr. Helsinger?
Carmine winced.
I doesn't like to be called that ever since the trouble I got in. And, losing his license.
He got it back, just to reduce grade.
Yeah, but, you know how men are.
Yeah, I do, unfortunately.
Carmine winced. Flux had been born as a boy, and it had taken a lot of therapy, medication, and then an unfortunate kidnapping and medical experimentation to turn her into who she was now. The fact that she was happy with all she'd gone through because she loved who she was now didn't take the sting out of the confusion and pain she'd endured.
I sent it to you already.
You did what?
Yeah, I had it figured out 90 seconds ago. Wanted to make sure that was what you wanted, though.
You sneaky puta.
I'd be your bitch any day, sweetie.
Cass might not like that.
She'd be there watching and helping. Seriously, though, we have to get the fam together.
We do. You're the one hiding out.
Well, I'm working on it. Soon, I promise. I don't know how much longer I can go without seeing and hugging you all.
I can speak for us all and agree that we'd love that.
Flux sniffed, another simulated noise based on her emotions.
Okay, I've got things to do, but call me sometime just to talk, okay? Maybe give me some dirt on Amy and Jane. They seem way too happy.
I'll do that, I promise. After I figure out what's up with Heels.
Okay, bye, sweetie. Love you.
Love you too.
Carmine terminated the call. She looked at her phone, and there it was. An address for the shadow clinic Heels was running for people that couldn't afford to get regular health care. The ride across town to the south side of downtown Phoenix flew by. Carmine's thoughts were on Heels and all he'd been through. He'd been a doctor on the leading edge of merging humanity and technology at Arizona State University. He'd even done most of the work on her sister, Amy. Then he caught the polyvirus. Like her, he'd survived but been left changed by it. She'd been fat before. She winced at the thought. Amy would have slapped her for saying that. Maybe not fat, but thick, fluffy. Whatever. She felt fat. When she caught PV while visiting the world, Amy had been born on the sickness, had burned her up from the inside as it changed her. She couldn't eat or move or do anything for days. Amy carried her and cared for her. She took her to a river and held her in it to keep her from burning up. She caught PV while visiting the world Amy had been born on. The sickness had changed her, burning her up from the inside. She couldn't eat or move or do anything for days. Amy carried her and cared for her. She took her to a river and held her in it to keep her from burning up. When she finally came back to her senses, she was a changed woman. She was half the weight she'd been before, but somehow her body was better. Stronger, curvier. Good curves, though, not the soft ones from before. But all of that was nothing next to what changed inside of her. She could see things now, feel things, auras, patterns, magic, the flow of magic in the world around her, and how she could interact with it and make it do things. The polyvirus turned her into a witch. She parked in the dirt lot behind the abandoned factory and did a quick check of her hair and makeup before she headed to the back door and tried it. It was locked, but she was a witch. She spoke the words the magic understood, and the old-fashioned lock twisted and released. She smiled and entered the building. She locked the door again behind her, but used her hand instead of magic. Every interaction she made with the eldritch forces of the world took something from her. She got it back over time with rest and recovery, but the less she strained herself now, the better she'd be later. Carmine walked across the mostly empty production floor and glanced up some stairs that led to offices and mezzanines. It was dark, save for the light that filtered through the dirtier broken windows. The sun wouldn't set for a few hours yet, and if it did, she had the light of her phone, or if nothing else, she could create a magical light. She stopped next to a wall and reached out to put her hand on it. She closed her eyes and relaxed. Her senses opened and expanded, feeling more than just what she could see, hear, smell, or touch. The way the energy flowed through the abandoned building confirmed it wasn't abandoned. There were people here. Not a lot, but enough to make a difference. A warmth of life that was ahead of her and to the left. She opened her eyes and followed it. One swinging door later, and she was in a break room. A few picnic tables remained bolted to the floor, as well as empty counters and cupboards. Empty spots, marked where vending machines and coolers had once been. A door at the far end beckoned to her. She approached it and opened it slowly, spilling light out from the hallway with a bench on one side of it. 4 people turned and stared at her. A woman was halfway off the bench and about to pull her son after her. The other 2 were men. The child and one of the men looked sickly. The man coughed into his elbow to prove it. The other man was cradling his ribs and had dried blood on his face, an uneven nose, and a general puffiness and discoloration from blunt force trauma. Carmine raised her hands.
Looking for heels.
The woman sank back into her seat slowly.
Police?
No, a friend.
The woman clucked in her throat.
In there, but he's with someone. Be in a couple hours. Looked like they'd be better off dead to me.
Gracias.
Carmine's shoes clicked as she strode across the hallway. She'd worn shoes with low, chunky heels, but now she realized flats might have been better, and maybe not the expensive pencil skirt and blouse. These people were in bad shape medically and financially. She pulled the door open on the opposite side of the hall and walked through. There was nothing she could do about her clothes now. Well, she could make alterations with a spell, but that would be a waste of time and strength. Right now, it didn't look like she had either.
Not ready.
The very big and tall man towering over the portable medical cot said. He wore a stained white doctor's jacket and could probably touch the ceiling if he lifted his arm straight up.
Go sit down.
You called me.
He spun and looked at her, his eyes wide beneath his heavy brow. His jaw was thick and matched the slope of his forehead, even though it was hidden beneath a surgical mask that was probably too small for his large head. The polyvirus had caused Carmine to lose size and gave her power and beauty in exchange. Dr. Helsinger had gained size, at least a half a meter of height, and probably 100 kilos in bone, muscle, and skin. He definitely hadn't gained any beauty out of it. That had led to his spiral. He couldn't fix what happened to him no matter how hard he tried. His medical license was suspended because he couldn't master his new body and perform the delicate surgeries he'd once been known for. That was what really broke him. His need to dull the pain with booze and drugs caused the permanent loss of his license.
Hey, wasn't sure you'd come.
Say, you ask, I'm here.
She knew him from before, when Amy was his patient. Then she met him all over again in a group therapy session for PV survivors. Most of them turned to ways to cope with how their bodies and their lives had changed.
That's what we do.
He snorted. She went up and placed a hand on his arm.
I'm here, heels. What? Madre de Dios.
The corpse on the cot was gruesome. His clothes had been cut off, and there were discarded, bloody bandages lying on the floor. A couple of IV bags were hanging nearby with the tubes going into the body's elbow, but it was too late. Their head was malformed, and so were some fingers and one arm, and well, the damage was massive. Then he blinked. Carmine screamed and jumped back.
Not helping.
He's alive?
Yeah.
And awake?
Yeah.
But how?
Heels pointed at a datapad to trigger sent the stream of data coming into the comlink implanted in his head to the device. Text scrolled across it, which Carmine quickly scanned.
This is.
She trailed off, unable to find a word in English or Spanish to express herself.
He's got a chip bypassing the damage in his brain to keep him functioning? And it doesn't want any anesthesia?
Afraid it might interfere with the signals keeping him alive. I'm putting fluids in, but there's no way this body survives long term. I can fix stuff, but his brain? The swelling alone will kill him if I put the skull back together.
If he's got tech, there's not much I can do.
Not much tech. Some chip in his head and it's connected to ears and eyes.
Oh, still, this is a lot.
A new line of text appeared that read, "Please help me." Carmine's mouth went dry.
It can hear us?
Another line of text stated yes.
Can't talk. That part of his brain got shaken up.
How? How did this happen?
The patient wrote out the answer for her. I fell out a window.
Dios.
Carmine said and shook her head. She focused on the man and tried to look past the blood and injuries. Without the swelling and everything, he wasn't a bad-looking guy. In shape, but not bulging with muscles. He was probably on the upper side of average before. Now, after this,
If you can help with the brain, I can work on the rest. That, and if you can try to help minimize the scars.
Carmine swallowed and nodded.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll try. Doce. Do you have a name?
It almost seemed like there was a pause before his name appeared on the pad. I'd rather not say.
That's mysterious.
Is it, Carmella?
Carmine tried not to flinch. Carmella was the nickname she had for when she helped Amy and Jane with jobs that weren't always on the up and up, or when she just didn't want people knowing who she really was. It was also why he used it here, because she didn't want anyone in his clinic knowing her real name and tracking her down.
What can I call you then?
The man answered with Kate.
Kate? That hey. I don't judge. My best friend has a partner and I have 2 moms.
He explained the choice as just a safe name.
Sure, okay. All right, Kate. I'm a witch, but not the kind that puts kids in her oven. I'm going to use my magic to try and help you, but it might feel funny. Try to stay calm. I don't know how much I'll be able to help, but I'm going to try. For surviving this long, you deserve the chance. You're obviously a fighter. I've got news for you, hermano, I'm a fighter too.
The delay on the datapad was noticeable before he typed, "Thank you."
What you need from me, Shika.
Carmine swung around to look at the large man.
Start by never trying to speak Spanish again?
He smiled at her, revealing some teeth that looked more like tusks than human canines. She suppressed a shiver.
Stay back for now. I'll see what I can do.
He grunted and raised his hands. Carmine did the same. The difference was, she turned back to Kate and moved around the cot so she could look down at the lumpy mess that was his skull. Or by going by the name Kate did she want to be considered a woman instead of a man?
Kate.
Carmine hesitated. How would she even ask a question like that? She tossed it aside and focused instead on the matter at hand. Brain matter, in fact.
I'm going to start now. Try to stay calm, all right?
Kate typed, "I will." Carmine closed her eyes and took a centering breath. She opened them again and let her eyes refocus. The colors and patterns of mystical energy slid into view, blending into her normal view of the world. She watched how they moved in, around, and through Kate's head. There were dull spots that she knew meant there were problems with the natural forces of the world being able to interact. Other areas were raw and angry, or worse, dead or dying. The dull spots were where technology had been implanted into Kate's skull. A chip and some wires or contacts, then Kate's eyes and some small parts inside Kate's ears. She focused instead on the injured parts first, and slowly brought her hands in to brush against Kate's head over the surface areas. She did her best to ignore the mushy texture of Kate's scalp. The dried blood and juices were crusty. Where the leakage was fresh, it was moist and either slick or sticky. She didn't let herself dwell on it, or she knew she'd probably throw up. She spoke then, her words whispered and unintelligible to Hilez and Kate. The language she used wasn't one meant for mundane ears or understanding. Her commands pulled and manipulated the flow of energy. One bruised or shaken section at a time began to pulse and throb as her magic helped them recover from damage. Blood flow increased, and the damaged tissues were synergized by the flow of magic into them to recover and implement new cell growth. Carmine breathed even and easy, manipulating the magic into the surface areas that were hurt but not in imminent danger. Then she had to focus deeper, finding the areas that were in imminent danger. She pulled back her focus for a moment and buried herself in the magic that was flowing through the room. It had grown, her efforts pulling more and more of it into the room from the surrounding areas. Immersed as she was, she carefully slipped her fingers into the exposed tissue and worked them into the folds and pools of blood and secretions. Her fingers continued to serve as conduits for the magic, and now they delivered it directly to the ruined flesh. Kate, to her credit, remained perfectly still throughout the sensations that tickled through her brain. Carmine strained to push more power into the wrecked areas of Kate's brain. There were parts that were beyond resistant, they were ruined. Undaunted, she pushed the magic in to purge out the dead flesh and then begin regrowing the missing tissue. As she did this, she caught glimpses of images and felt the stirrings of memories and feelings. Her breath caught in her throat and her heart beat faster. She couldn't hold any of the visions or feelings long enough to make sense of them. It was exciting and terrifying. How was she experiencing all of it? What did it mean for him, for Kate? Carmine pulled her fingers out slowly, squeezing out magic to soothe the sensitive tissue she left behind and sterilizing any possible contaminants she might leave behind. When her fingers slipped free at last, she felt the pain in her back and the weakness in her legs. Her shoulders burned and her neck felt like it would never move again. But she wasn't done yet. She refocused herself and focused on capturing more of the magic around her. It came to her call sluggishly, resistant to her tampering at first, but she bent her will to it and it responded and gathered. This time, it was easier again, coaxing the flow of energy into the bone and skin and feeling them shift and align with help from her fingers. The bone began to knit together just enough to keep it in place. The skin came next, mending tears and growing raw pink cells to close gaps that were too wide. She kept pushing the magic even when her grip on it slipped. It escaped her and retreated, returning to its natural flow around the room. Carmine reached for it again, but it wouldn't come to her call. Her voice wasn't even a raspy whisper anymore. Her chest ached and her stomach was trembling. Carmine closed her eyes to dig deep into herself for a third wind, but instead of finding a hidden reserve, all she found was darkness. She never felt the sudden weightlessness of falling or the sudden stop at the end.
Thank you for listening to Cocoon. Keep an eye out for Butterfly, the next part in this series. And if you liked it, burn a calorie or two clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel.